Welcome to Fightsword Radio. I'm your host, Jake, a swordsmith, armorer, and fighter. Here, we discuss all the same fight sword topics you've heard before, but in ways you've never imagined. Is your Nippon steel even glorious? Pain is the base currency of fighting. Let me tell you, judging by how wrong he thought I was doing it, his neck beard must be on all the way down to the well-worn cushion of his armchair. Always remember, fight sword is love, fight sword is life. All right, how's it going, guys?
That's a bit overly long, but it is charming.
Yes, thank you. I do all my best. All right, good. I just wanted to make
I have so much charisma. I want to take the next 5 minutes to tell you all about it.
Well, then deal with it. All right, folks. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Fightsword Radio. We have a good man here that is highly proficient, to say the least, in a Korean martial art called Mcdojo. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So I'm Justin Sanders. History as far as sword background, my main thing is in Mcdojo. I did that, from 2006 and kind of tapered off at about 2016, largely due to kids.
Yeah.
A couple very early preemies.
Wow. Okay.
So 82 days in the NICU is not fun.
Oh, yeah.
It's not cheap. So I've kind of had a few years off a little bit, but I did compete internationally in it.
Wow.
I did Pan America tournaments. I competed at the World Tournament in South Korea.
World Tournament in South Korea. So Korean martial art that a white guy went and competed in.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Now, real quick, let's just define Mcdojo if we could.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Mcdojo is a traditional Korean sword art.
Okay.
And as a traditional sword art, it is not a sparring art. So it is all about kind of preserving the history, the forms, the motions.
Okay.
So you're competing in forms, you're competing in demonstrations, you're doing cutting.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
And if I may back up just a little bit.
Sure.
So Justin's a good friend of mine. We've known each other for a very long time. We went to the same class, studied under the same teachers. In fact, he even taught me for a while. Me and Jake were discussing ways to improve the show, what to talk about. And so I was like, there's a guy we got to bring on. He's so dang knowledgeable. He's humble. He's very skilled at what he does. He knows more than I do. Let's bring him on and have him come on the show, talk about that. And so
hopefully I can live up to that.
Well, something to know about Justin is whatever he says he's good at, you got to up that just a couple more times.
It's a little unassuming.
Well, to put it mildly, yes. But one thing I think he has a really unique perspective of is we like to talk a bit of trash, especially on certain types of swords, certain types of sword styles.
Yes.
Well, Justin can really put, he can bring us he can clarify with proper book smarts and back it up with actual papers, all the smack we've been talking.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, we got to have Justin on. So just my little intro. This is a man who's competed on the international scale and won.
So at the World Tournament, now the World Tournament is a funny thing. I've never seen a tournament that operates like this. So in Korea, there are about as many practitioners as there are outside of the world that will go to the tournament.
Okay.
So what they do is the Koreans will compete amongst themselves, and the rest of the world competes amongst themselves, and the top one person in each of the categories will then compete.
Interesting.
So it kind of becomes Korea versus the world kind of thing.
I'm sure they like it that way.
Yeah. So it's very, very interesting, very entertaining.
That's very Korean because they were always getting invaded.
Yeah. Korea definitely has that.
By the way, interesting podcast guest brought maps. So I'll be interested to see where this goes.
So,
wait, for each one of us?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're so prepared.
Dude, this is cool. I feel less prepared than the guest.
And before we go on, I know we interrupted your train of thought. What is the proper terminology for a Korean katana? Because I know that makes you cringe every time we say that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's kind of a moan line. It's single-edged. It's harder to use than a longsword. It's a katana.
Yeah, for us homunculoids who aren't using it. I even studied it for a long time, and I've forgotten the terminology. I just knew I was saying it wrong, but For our listeners, what is it called?
I mean, we'll go into more of the names as we go over, history.
Sure.
It's evolved over the time. But modern day, it's called a jinkam.
Jinkam.
Which means?
Basically a true edge, a true sword. So gum is a sword.
Okay.
And so as you hear that, you'll hear sword. You also hear do. Those have been used interchangeably over time. But anytime you hear gum, that is a type of sword.
Okay.
Speaking of swords, can you elaborate on like Admiral Super Waves giant swords?
Admiral Yi Sun Sin's
You're
sword.
gonna love this.
Yeah. So let me.
In the packet, I have pictures of it if you wish to view this.
This is this 15-pound. What's it? Jinkam?
That would be a
Page 3.
Sung Sudo or a Jangdo is what they would be.
It's this one.
Okay.
So it's this middle. So you have these two right here.
Okay.
So
That's
they are 77 inches long.
Jeez. It's as big as me.
Yeah, I mean they're massive.
Yeah.
Now I found
Some of us are a little more akin to handling such large weapons.
Oh, okay, fine.
I found conflicting reports as far as the weight.
Okay.
But to give you a range, the swords themselves weigh somewhere between 4 to 6 pounds each.
Okay, I was way off.
Some I've heard say as high as 12 each, but it's one of those is that 12 each or 12 altogether?
I can't imagine 12. Like, that's so much weight to handle.
It would be unwieldy at that point. From what I know about swords and the minimal amount, looking at these and how long they are, they're probably anywhere between 6 and 8 pounds, probably.
Yeah.
That would be about my guess. And
I'd say that too.
Still heavy.
Yeah.
So, and there is also a lot of debate about their use. So, some reports say that they were just ceremony.
Okay.
The history I've seen with this guy, he probably did use them. To the extent is still contested.
Right.
So, being a naval commander, one of the theories is and he did dual wield these.
Okay.
Fantastic. Little Korean dude with 77-inch.
Koreans are not.
They're stout though. They're not little. They're moderate, medium-sized, and stout. Kind of like I want to say the
Welsh.
The Welsh. Thank you. They're like
because
Asian Welshmen.
They have over being invaded and all of that. They have more like Mongol, genes in there and other stuff. So you can get some pretty big Koreans. Like one of the masters I trained with at the World Tournament, the dude is like 6'4", 6'5". I mean, you can get some pretty big Koreans even back then.
Yeah.
But the Korean boats were typically taller than the Japanese, so they'd have to kind of scale up. So the theory is he would just dual wield these, and as they're coming up, he is just
like Gimli on the walls of Helm's Deep, racking up the kill
just
count. Yeah.
hammering down. The other thing they talked about is, like on land and whatnot. With those, it is very much large arcs. It's a lot of continual motion, getting that going.
Yeah.
He did, from records I say, he chose the style.
Okay.
So this is actually more of a Japanese style if you look at the hilt.
Okay.
If you look at, I got a picture up there a little bit, that is the Korean.
And I think this is important. We were talking about this before. Koreans really customize their swords on.
There is no standard.
Individual.
Yes,
and this is very unusual because we're used to seeing.
Yeah.
Well, let's be honest. The relationship in America, and that's where we're filming here and recording, is a very intimate one with Japan. We were at war with them. We're the ones who originally back in the day forced them to start trading with the world again after they shut themselves off. And there's this Hollywood infatuation with their pop culture and the samurai and stuff. And so we tend to see Asia, we think Japan, and we think of the way that Japan views the world. And the truth of the matter is, it's one tiny little island in a
third of the world population,
yes,
more than a third of the world's population.
Exactly. And so it's really fun to learn about Korea because you'll see similarities to Japan. But how can I put this politely? If someone removed the rod out of their ass.
So Korea
is that not inaccurate?
That's good.
So to put it in more politically correct terms or a philosophy, I mean, Korea being in the peninsula that it was and is, they were constantly being, attacked by Chinese dynasty, Mongol or other tribes, Japan.
Yeah.
So, and they were also a very big center of trade.
Okay.
And then depending on who they trade with, you can see the influences. Basically, they take what they like and make it their own. So you'll see this Korean aspect to it, but then you will see the flair or the hint of where it came from.
Yeah.
So they adapt. And that's what I love about the Koreans is they adapt.
And in that way, they're very much like a Western culture.
Yeah.
Because that's all we did back in the day, too. We took what worked and threw everything else away.
Yeah, basically.
Till Maximilian era. But that's another thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other thing. So, could we reasonably then infer that, like, their swords, they said, okay, well, this basic concept we're pretty interested in, but we're going to just make it how we want to make it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now I actually want to pause really quick and remark on something. So, I was talking with Arden. This was a couple years ago.
You'd like him, cool dude.
He's a solid guy. And, I had noticed that, like, a lot of, like Japanese military technology didn't really evolve nearly at the rate that their Western counterparts did. I mean, the medieval European arms race was insane. It was changing every 15, 20 years. The armor was, those generations evolved fast. He's like, well, nothing was just so sanctified that you couldn't question if it was wrong or not. And then you see that same mentality in Korea. Like, there's nothing that's so sacred that you can't question if maybe there's something wrong with it or not quite current anymore.
I would say that is typically true. There are things that they do keep very, very traditional.
Sure.
And I agree with their reasons. Like, you have the Korean sword dance.
Yeah.
So they things that are not necessarily going to be used in a military life or death situation. If it's removed from that scene, then they will keep it very traditional. Keep their heritage, their culture. That sword dance, that dates back to the shamanistic religion time,
If you had to throw a date on it,
thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
And then, that's kind of survived when, Buddhism came around, when they went to the Neo-Confucius and all of that, even surviving the Japanese occupation in the early 1900s. Which is why people don't know much about Korea, because Japanese, infiltrated the martial arts market in the 70s. Yeah. Korea had to kind of recover from that whole Japanese occupation thing. They had to kind of reestablish. Yeah. So it didn't come over here till the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
Which, actually, could you clarify a Korean folk hero for me? He sprang up. He was a. See if you get this rings a bell. He was a wealthy merchant. Okay. Who, after the Japanese mowed down the original defenders of Korea on their way to China, he fought back in guerrilla-like tactics, and he had a red cloak. And it was said that it was dyed in the menstrual blood of virgins.
I have not heard that one.
You haven't heard that one?
No, I have not heard that one. I may need to do more research to see.
He's actually a pretty cool dude. Big dude.
Yeah. That one I have not heard or come across my research.
That kind of wackiness. So what it reminds me of is so there's a folklore surrounding the battle axes of Christian knights in the Holy Lands. Yeah. And it's anecdotal, but it's repeated enough that you wonder if it isn't true or not. And that is that they would quench their battle axes in the urine of redheaded virgins and other, who knows?
Yeah. Just like the Japanese quenching it in blood and
all these kinds
things.
of things. Yeah. And so what that is that's silly. Well, maybe I'm putting a modern lens on it, but one of the things I was really hoping we could talk about today was how does martial arts turn from a system of defense, leadership, philosophy to a form of I would consider degradation, which is mysticism and ritual, because it seems like, unfortunately, that I'm not just want to crap all over Japan, but as Jake put it earlier, they had 300 years of no war, which is impressive.
Or at least no war outside of themselves.
Okay, fair. Yeah. Which means a lot of things become ritualized. You have nothing to do with this warrior culture. On the other hand, you have Korea, which was always getting invaded, so there was never time to make... I was making this joke on the drive over here. It's like you could have two guys dueling in Japan, and one of them's like, well, I picked out more cherry blossoms than you on that tree. They have a perfect corolla, therefore I win. It got so ridiculous. I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
and as fair as fair, during the time of Maximilian, you started getting armor that was
absurd.
Yeah.
that served no purpose in defense, and I think really hurt. One of the reasons why you have humanists and historians trying to redevelop and rediscover Western martial arts is it became a silly thing. Mm-hmm. And so people let it go. And actually, much to the credit of the Japanese, they really held on. The one thing that I think in some ways made their martial art degrade into mysticism still kept it around historically, so they never lost it. So maybe there's a pro and con to that. You are more of an expert on this than I am. What are your thoughts?
So, I do have an issue with some degradation and other things, but as far as ceremony, ritual, mysticism, I think it's essential.
Go on.
I was
You
waiting
don't have
to
a
see.
sounding board for that?
I've been waiting all day to see what your reaction to that would
Well, no shit.
I got something.
be. So you kind of touched on one point. It's about keeping your history, your culture. The Japanese did that very, very well. The Koreans, the sword dance and other things, they did that very, very well. And that leaves you to a sense of identity. And we still do that today.
Go on.
So look at religions. Look at Hollywood. Look at Miss. We always...
Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. That was what I was going to bring up. You got the Jedi. Every culture, everywhere, has some form of mysticism or some form of a being, a philosophy, or mentality that is above and beyond what you yourself are capable of. And I think that is an essential human characteristic to progress. So that part of that mysticism, I think, to maintain that, but you have to keep it in the context of this is what you keep outside of war.
Yeah.
You don't bring that into war. And that's where I think the Japanese, to their detriment, suffered.
Now, where like, is there a specific war or time frame you're referring to that?
So you look up the war during the Joseon era, 1500s. Again, this is Admiral Yi, where...
Of course, Admiral Yi.
Yeah, I absolutely love Admiral Yi. I mean, he is a Korean national hero.
Okay.
The dude is
Oh,
regarded as one of the top naval geniuses.
He's like Themistocles.
He's
for
like
Korea.
Themistocles of Asia.
Yes.
Okay,
I mean, I've heard
Cool dude.
him compared to, what is it, Nelson in the Western? But basically, the dude has a 0-loss record.
Whoa.
I mean, he took on the Japanese at the end with, oh gosh, I didn't go back and double check the figures, but it's something in the neighborhood of 11 Korean ships versus a fleet of a few hundred Japanese ships.
And beat them.
And sent them packing.
Whoa.
He was a cool dude.
That is legit.
There was a movie about him on Netflix, and at first it starts off kind of cool, and I'm really enjoying it, and then it starts throwing in like Bollywood-style nonsense towards the end. You're like, come on.
Okay, if you need a good one, I own it. We can go watch it. It's called The Admiral.
Okay.
Freaking fantastic movie. It's a little over-dramatized in a few areas.
As they all are.
I will give that as kind of a Hollywood-ish cultural license there, but the essence of it is I think very accurate to as far as the written records and history. That era, the Joseon area, is pretty well documented, and that's a little easier.
So
That, it's very difficult to research.
Okay, so like so you're talking about the Joseon era and the Japanese bringing mysticism into war. Give me 3 examples of that.
Okay, I'm actually going to jump to World War II on you.
Do it.
So you've got
about.
that Japanese warrior mentality, that mysticism, and that generates into the kamikaze mentality, which is more than suicide bombing. It's the whole map.
We got to be careful. We're going to start talking about some very controversial subjects.
Yes, yeah. But basically, when you look at when the U.S. started taking islands back, most forces, if you kill, a third, a quarter, the rest of it breaks, disbands, scatters. Not the Japanese. They would fight almost to the man on those islands.
Whoa. And wasn't there actually history where they found where there was only 1 or 2 guys left, and rather being taken alive, they just blew themselves up?
Yes. So
That's impressive.
that mysticism, that ritualism, made them as a group a very formidable force. So like that's why they invaded Korea, China, all of that, and were successful.
You couldn't scare them into quitting.
No, I mean ultimately because that mysticism, I think that led to them eventually losing.
In some ways, it caused cohesion, but that rigid war is chaos, and it made them too rigid.
Yeah, I mean, so they wouldn't adapt like Koreans or Westerns did. So, I think they kind of lost kind of that military technology supremacy, but mentality-wise, they would be hard pressed to find another society that had that kind of cohesion mentality as far as moving forward.
I remember reading somewhere, much to the Japanese credit, that when the Portuguese explorers brought guns, and it changed the face of Japan, it unified under essentially one banner.
Yep.
They actually went up and decided that guns were too dishonorable since a peasant could kill a samurai.
Yeah.
And so even though you still had people vying for power under one banner, they all universally agreed to destroy the guns they had learned how to make and forget how to make them. And I can't think of another society on Earth that would do that. And, I mean, and I actually am rather impressed by that. Like, it makes no sense from a strategic perspective, but...
Are you serious?
Right?
Sorry, I had to use that.
But the honor, like...
Yeah, that's that. I mean, they used guns for a while. Like one of their big civil wars, the Netflix documentary. Like they were totally using guns, and they just all collectively went, nah.
It's too dishonorable.
And so this is where
That's actually impressive, right?
Yeah.
So, so ridiculous.
Outside of that scene of the battlefield, that life and death. I mean, that's where you have to adapt. That's where you have to mentally check your brain and go, okay, mysticism. We're going to put you on the back burner here. Yeah. But outside of that context, as far as identity, like I said, the Japanese, that mindset that they then took into war, I think that is an essential characteristic that a lot of societies don't have, and that many other, even today, we still do it, but not to that extent.
Well, one thing that's kind of come back, give me 1 second. One thing that's kind of kept coming to my mind is like, when you guys were describing the Japanese fighting on the Pacific Islands and things, they'd go basically to the man. Like, it seems like a similar motivating force to get people to do that would be patriotism. I feel like that's an example of quote unquote mysticism, right?
If you want patriotism, look up Yi Sun Shin. Okay. The dude was wealthy. He was in a higher class, and it was during the Neo-Confucius era. So soldiers' warfare was thought as a lesser socially acceptable profession. Okay. He gave that up, joined the army. He would not take a bribe and got demoted, overlooked. Wow. Until another commander who he had family ties, or his family knew. It's like, okay, why are you here in this grunt position? He's just like, let me transfer you over to the Navy. And he built the Navy completely up to this massive, formidable thing, zero loss. And then when the Japanese invaded during that war, one of the land generals became very, very jealous of his success rate, his power rate, and managed to frame him as a traitor. Dick. And to the point that the king believed it, imprisoned and tortured him. And then, that land general got command of the Navy and absolutely got destroyed by the Japanese. That's why he only had those 11 ships.
So he was actually brought out of jail and then still continued to defend Korea.
Exactly. Awesome. The king went, okay, we managed to clear your name. Sorry about the torture, the imprisonment,
Here's 11 ships, go fix it.
Yeah. It's like, go out and go do it. Yeah. And so he has this very, very small force. So he had to motivate his men to go out and fight, against what is seemingly an impossible thing. And he uses the drum dance, the sword dance, those ritualistic things to get the men, mentally prepared for the battle, and then goes out and wins.
So it sounds like what you're saying is mysticism is a piece of the puzzle that keeps the cohesion together.
Yes.
But like anything, it needs to remain within balance. Otherwise, the puzzle doesn't fit anymore.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So yeah.
One more thing. I got one more thing. So we were talking about World War II. We had impressive guns. We had all these things that we thought would shock and awe and demoralize the Japanese, and it just didn't. But there was one thing, and it was on accident, that demoralized the warriors more than anything else. This is according to reading their journals and things like that, and you'll never guess what it was. The Japanese soldiers, when they were sent out with their ammo, they were required to bring back every brass shell.
What?
Because of limited resources.
Oh.
And when they were fighting the Americans, the fact that we never bothered to clean up our brass casings, they were like, how can we win against a country that has so much resource that they don't even bother to clean up their spent ammo casings? And that was the only real thing that demoralized. Other than that, they were like, we are impervious, we are Japanese, which is good for them.
Yeah.
But it kind of, I think we take for granted a lot of times the place where we live.
Yeah.
When was it Gorbachev who came in and we were trying to impress him with, this was before the wall fell.
Yeah.
With how great America was, he was just like, yeah, we have this, we have that, we have this, and then like he happened to spy a regular grocery store and walk in and see that it was full and teeming with food. It was such a staggering eye-opener for he assumed, oh, this has to be propaganda.
Yeah.
Immediately goes to like another random grocery store and saw it repeated over and over and over again. And it was the fact that we can feed our people consistently that really changed his mind that communism had robbed the Russian people so thoroughly, and it was none of our power. It was our ability to produce.
It's the fact that we have things we can throw away.
Yes.
I figured like your story was going to be like he saw like a 3-year-old eating an ice cream cone, but I mean, same sentiment basically. Okay, cool. So
Produce.
So, sort of getting back, circling.
Sorry,
back
I got way off track.
No, you're okay. Like, this is a great conversation. I like this. So, basically, getting back to the original question, it was, what is it that leads, a martial system that's designed to fight and designed to defend you and kill the other guy? How does that turn into what we see a lot of Eastern martial arts have become? And you're going, well, it's a necessary component of the human condition that we need this, and it just happens.
You've changed my mind, by the way.
Yeah.
So thoroughly. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I am going to stand by the fact that it can rise up and swallow the meaningful attributes of a martial art.
And you can really see a lot of this in most Eastern martial arts. I mean, that fact was demonstrated with mixed martial arts and in the UFC.
I could watch those videos for hours.
Well, you see like Hoist Gracie double legging some dude doing Tai Chi, like choking him out. Yeah, we know how it works now.
What are your thoughts?
Tai Chi is not a combative art.
So here's the thing. I'll be 100% honest with you. I defended myself with Tai Chi once from someone who was trying to rob me.
Okay.
And I broke his arm.
Wow.
And I ran. And I just ran.
Wow.
And
I'm willing to bet. Hang on, real quick.
I straight up used parting the wild horse's mane and wave hands like Cloud, and I straight up broke his arm and ran off.
Okay.
That motion is in a number of other martial arts, which are combative martial arts. They have techniques, but the overall system is not combative.
Okay, there we go. That's fair.
So you use
100% agree with you.
system or a technique within that system that is effective.
Yeah.
So where the majority of the art itself is not.
So he came in. I don't know what he had in his hand. I just noticed that it was something. And parting the wild horse's mane is this. And I came in with the shoulder and threw him to the ground and popped and hyperextended his elbow. He immediately screamed and dropped that, and I ran.
Right.
That's a very common technique.
And
you'll see it in Hapkido. You'll see it in Aikido. You'll see it in a large variety of other arts.
But at the time, I was only trained in Tai Chi.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you didn't get stabbed.
I actually have been stabbed.
Yes, that is a different story. Yes.
No. This story is too good not to share. So I was selling Cutco.
All right.
as all teenagers do at some point in their life. And this was in Oregon.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons I moved from Oregon, is the place has been getting sketchy for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And I was in the wrong part of town. It was getting late, and I wasn't supposed to be out driving. Like, I wasn't the kind of kid who was out partying. I was out working, but I technically didn't have a proper license to drive.
Okay.
So I wasn't supposed to be out. This guy approaches me. He was high on something. He wasn't acting normal. He lurches into me, and it's like a part of my brain understood that I had been stabbed, but didn't let my conscious brain recognize it.
Okay.
And I've been selling Cutco all day long, and I had like that purse thing they give you.
Yeah.
And so after he slams into me, I push him off me. I grab whatever I first can, and I slash at him, and I shout, "This is Cutco!" And his eyes go white, like, this MFer is crazy, and just... I've been selling it all day. My adrenaline was high, everything. He runs. And it was a paring knife. I mean, the blade on it's like this big.
Yeah.
And...
But let's face it, you're a big dude, and you're yelling and screaming, and the stab did not stop you.
It's Cutco! Right?
Yeah.
I wish it was like manly, but honestly, it was more of a whimper, like when it came out. I'd just been stabbed. And I look down because I'm like, I feel wetness. Like, I thought I had peed myself. I look down, and there's this knife that managed to penetrate my belt.
Wow.
And get stuck through my bat and my pants, and it was sticking out. I still have a little bit of scar here. I show you, but and I just instinctively go like this,
yeah.
like it was stinging me or something.
Uh-huh.
And then I felt just that sharp pain in that bone, and I'm like, crap, I'm gonna get in trouble. That was literally the first thing on my mind.
I'm gonna get yelled at. I didn't get permission to get stabbed.
I didn't get permission to get stabbed.
Oh man.
Paper cut, not the worst pain in the world. I'll be honest with you.
I can imagine.
It goes, at least for me, getting electrocuted nearly to death. That's a funny story.
I'd do it.
Okay. Battle axe to the head, scars my face. That was pretty great.
Yes.
Getting stabbed. And then finally breaking 3 bones in my foot from when a horse stepped on me. Nah.
That'd be brutal.
Anyway, sorry. Long story, but it was worth the... it was worth the time. I like that story. It cracks me up.
Going back to the degradation issue.
Yes. Let's get into that.
So there's a couple reasons why I think it happens. Why we end up with the Mcdojos.
Yeah. And pause real quick. When we get towards the end of this, I've got something on Aikido that I want to touch on that I think will probably end up being on the same wavelength. Finish.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ways I think it comes. Some have multiple ways. One of them is when they try to make it a sport. So when you're then trying to take techniques that are in combat that are lethal and you want to use that as a sport, you then have to take safety measures, and there are aspects you lose of the art. And if you do that too much and restrict it too much, you just lose too much of the art. And over time, those old martial techniques just get lost in the wind.
Yeah, I've heard that complaint about karate, actually, quite a bit. I've seen a lot of people make that comment. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
The farther removed from danger you try to make a sport, the more diluted it becomes.
Yeah, obviously.
But obviously you have to have some safety net in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing you see is when you get, again, that ritualization, the Japanese, you lose that adaptation. I think that's another way. The other thing, and I agree with this, and that is for the preservation of identity and history. Hit 'em Come to Us, kind of one of those where it's something that they've, kept as a cultural identity. They don't do the sparring because they don't want to lose it, to have it become that sport. There are
arguments against this. You and I had that on the drive over here.
There are those of us
that
do spar with it, that do adapt with it, that do put together sparring programs with it, demonstrations.
Let me actually pause you real quick, because I'll actually comment on this real quick. The example of how those that are purists, say cultural purists with it, the reason they would disagree with it is a really good example is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's constantly evolving. You know, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now does not look like the same thing it did in 1993 at all. It's constantly evolving because it doesn't rely on kata or form. It relies on fundamental techniques like boxing, where it relies on just fundamental truths.
And you look at boxers back in the day with handlebar mustaches.
I'll clean your wagon.
Bully to you, I'll give him a cauliflower ear, you know.
Yeah.
And then boxers today, and they're, you know.
Yeah. And you know, you can kind of see marks in the path, especially with boxing. You look at like old boxing.
Still boxing.
Yeah, that's true. But you know, that's an example of how you know, with sport and spar combat, it'll evolve within a given rule set.
Yep.
Yeah. And we're gonna. I'm looking forward to towards the end when I show you like fight footage of me trying to do Heiden Gumdo, but I feel instantly limited by my rule set. You know, there's a disconnect between what John taught me and what the rule set sort of encourages. So anyway, I'll let you continue on that vein.
So, and as part of, you know, we've kind of discussed quite a bit, you know, I think that cultural identity, that history is something that is very, very important.
Yeah.
And it's something that as humans, we naturally do. So I agree with that. Now, I think that martial arts is too much of a blanket, you know.
Okay.
Or a blanket term.
This is actually really interesting. We were talking about this earlier.
Okay.
So I believe that term, especially in the U.S., has become very watered down. You know, because of these Mcdojos and all that, it's lost all that credibility. I think that either needs to be done away with, or at least understood that is like a global term. But then you have subcategories. So you have historical traditional arts. Heiden Gumdo would be one.
Kima
would be another one where it's
totally.
You're preserving that history. And if you go in and know that up front, then you're not going to be disillusioned. You're not going to go out. Tai Chi, another one. You're not going to go out and try and use that in a street fight, because otherwise you're going to get your ass kicked. You know,
Facts.
So
Right.
I would propose that, you know, you then call that, you know, a historical martial art.
Yeah.
Or a traditional martial art. Then you would have your sport martial arts. So here's where you're getting into your taekwondo or your karate or judo point fights. I would probably even group Western fencing in there a little bit.
Okay.
If we have time, I did Western fencing, and I have some fun stories that I think you guys would appreciate.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a reason why I don't do it anymore.
Okay.
I get
Really?
kicked out.
You got kicked out of something. Mr. Restraint himself. Here's the thing. I broke 3 swords in one semester of Olympic fencing. They didn't kick me out.
So I didn't necessarily get kicked out, but it was one of those I could see the looks, I could read the writing on the wall. I was not going to be welcome.
I'm going to leave before I'm told to go.
Okay.
I
So
don't have that self-awareness. That's the problem.
So to kind of give you an idea, I did fencing for a little bit. I'm not bad. So
Yeah.
again, John's kind of going to be smirking mentally if not, because I'm not the boastful type. I don't really try to do that.
3 levels higher than whatever he claims.
So like, I did compete in one tournament, and it's one that it was an open tournament. But looking at the level, and I had my buddy and others, like, you could have gone with the formal tournament and probably lettered.
Okay.
I didn't win that tournament because he was probably like 14. So he was good. I mean, I threw the bout by like,
version?
What?
Is there a short version?
Okay. So I did throw that bout to him.
Okay.
I mean, I let him win by like a point because I knew it was going to mean way more to him than it would be to me to win.
Oh, well, good for you. That's nice.
But so my background being Heiden Gumdo, which is big motion, you know, it's cut to kill. But then my other art that I did at the same time is Hapkido. So very, very self-defense. You know, I get in close, grapple. And so I started to learn saber. And this is where I was like, I'm going to get kicked out.
Okay, what happened?
So you're going through, I find like the rule of right away and all that completely ridiculous.
It is.
But anyway.
Wait a minute. I thought that was only in epee and and fencing was right of way. But Saber doesn't have that.
Saber, that's partially the reason why I did it. It's just,
okay, that's why I did
it's
Saber
just kind of
too.
an example of
Only reason I did Saber.
rules I will not follow. It just does
way.
not. It's too ingrained that I can't do it.
For the benefit of our listeners, let's tell them what right of way is, and all try not to roll our eyes in unison.
Yeah.
Okay, so the concept: if I start moving forward with, I've taken the initiative. It's like, come through. I have the right of way. If John here were to then just, if I'm off target and he just comes and stabs me, he does not get the point.
Because he had the initiative.
I had the initiative.
It's so stupid.
You have to parry to take control of the right of way.
Gay!
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, Saber doesn't have
And
that.
not
so
the
that's why I did-
delightful, flamboyant kind that we love.
That's just ridiculous.
That's
That's the
the
dumbest
I
shit I've
can't
ever
hear
heard.
you over the color of your tie, gay. Like, you know what I mean?
Again, here's that
like the
that
obnoxious
degradation,
kind.
that sport,
Yeah.
some of those rules that have moved away from combat. But
That's
anyway,
silly.
so Saber doesn't have that. So that's why I tried it.
That's why I did Saber too.
So like the guy, he came in with a thrust, and I parried off to the side, but he kept his momentum coming.
Okay.
And being Hapkido and Kumdo, I just continued the motion, brought my elbow up, and planted it right in his gut.
Awesome.
And I mean, I stopped it, so it was just this gentle little hit, and he was just like, oh, comes back. And the other example is, again, kind of, I don't remember the exact exchange, but it was, again, I parried and came around and did come to where I came in heavy, belly, just gut emboweling technique and just pounded that into him. Again, I stopped when it hit that light contact.
Yeah.
And again, he was just like, oh. So basically, I was getting kicked out or about to get kicked out for the equivalent of football, unnecessary roughness.
Okay. Got it.
This
so-
guy being unnecessarily rough.
Yeah, you weren't being unnecessarily rough. They're just pussies. Like, let's just call it like
Yeah,
this.
so I just had too much from Kumdo and Hapkido ingrained that.
Actual sword fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That the stick tag you were playing at wasn't meshing well.
So again,
I'm not wrong.
Degradation, again, you've got that sport, you've got the, the history, the tradition. I think the other part, and John, as we were traveling, touched on this, is you have people that either didn't learn, either through, you have that tradition, so they never learned like the core principle behind it. Then they become a teacher, and so therefore they didn't learn it, so they can't teach it. And, over time that gets lost. The other thing is the business aspect. So this is where the Mcdojos comes in. And Korea had a huge problem with this with Hapkido.
Really?
And I've even seen this with Kumdo. One guy, he left, he got kicked out for this. But basically what they did is they started basically selling belts. So it was all for the money. So it's like, it didn't matter to the instructor if you knew how to do that triangle choke or that throw or whatever. It's like, hey, you pay me X, I'll advance you.
Wow.
And you do that over time, you get a lot that gets lost.
Say what?
Mute my mic for a second.
Yeah.
Catholic Church.
I may have to mute that. I think my mic caught that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I just can't think of a better example than that.
Yeah.
There are plenty of examples of that in various aspects of life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So those are, I think, are the core things of why you see that degradation. And so some of it I agree with, that it's necessary in its proper place. But a lot of it, I think,
If I may elaborate on that, it's necessary in its proper place. So take me, awkward kid, horribly ADD, and I joined a silly Taekwondo dojo at like 12. And honestly, the martial discipline that required to work out every day, to do the planks, to do the push-ups, to do the horse stance, and then to see who could hold it the longest, it gave me such purpose when you're at that age and you're awkward and weird. And I mean, my dad was never around. It was almost like I lived in a divorced family. He was always gone. He was a salesman, and I saw him on the weekends. It was literally like we had a split home. Yeah. And so the only strong male influence I had as a kid for most of my life was like Master Ken. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
who tried to friend me on LinkedIn, by the way. No joke.
Really?
Master Kid.
Oh,
That is hilarious.
And I just like, whatever. I didn't accept it. I'm just like, again, that just felt too Mcdojo to me. It's like,
well, I mean, so I'm thinking of Master Ken as a YouTuber, and you know, every technique somehow comes around to hitting a guy in the dick.
yes.
New and exotic ways dating people. Like it's satire. It's hilarious.
It's great.
I love that guy.
But the point is, even if you're not teaching these kids how to fight, you're teaching them discipline. And I think at such an early age, that's almost infinitely more important.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And let's face it, if you're a martial arts instructor, you know, let's say you went to college for theater tech and art history, and now you actually have to pay your bills, and you become a martial arts instructor, and you basically teach kids from age 8 to age 12 a little bit of discipline and occasionally hand out a belt. I think you can still do a lot of good with that.
Sure.
I would totally agree. And honestly, this business where it is very much a balance, and it is very hard for a dojo, or in Korean we call it a dojang. Yeah.
Real quick, are you guys a little bit warm? If so, I'm a little bit warm. I'm thinking of turning on the AC.
I'm from St. George.
Okay, so
I
you're
feel
doing
cold,
fine.
I
actually.
fight in black armor.
You doing all right?
I'm fine.
Well, I'm a wuss. Keep talking. I'm going to turn on the AC.
So it's a very fine balance to keep that motivation, to keep the art, but then to also, make money off of it. And it's very easy to maintain that student, to make sure that they feel like they're progressing, even if they're really, really struggling with a certain thing, and they shouldn't progress, but because you want to maintain that student, maintain that business, and stay solvent, it's really easy, really tempting to advance them for the business side.
Yes.
And it is a very hard balance, which is why I don't think I could ever see myself running or owning a dojang. I wouldn't mind being an instructor and all that in there, but I don't think.
But there's a moral quandary there. At what point am I diluting this?
It is too much of a balance, and I don't think.
And I need to eat. I get it.
Yeah.
But if you were teaching that kind of fighting to an adult and then pitted him against a boxer of the same age with the same amount of training, boxer would beat the crap out of him.
Oh yeah.
Again, this is where going into those subsets, you need to be upfront and clear what that art is, so they know what they're getting themselves into.
And along that argument, you can teach boxing to kids, and they will get. And I think boxing is unique in this because it's managed to succeed in teaching them all of the disciplinary beneficial things that of the dojos we just got done talking about, and actually give them some sense of real world fighting. Can you think of anything else that does that?
Jiu-jitsu, judo.
Hapkido.
Fair enough. Okay, fine. It was a dumb question. Nicely done.
No.
So, example, Hapkido. We had to.
Hapkido's good stuff.
We had to tell.
I've never seen it.
Our younger kids, these, I think 5 to 7 is about where we would take them. Typically, 7 was about our cutoff, just due to cognitive mental development.
Yeah.
But these 7 to 10-year-olds, we had to tell them to stop using it on their parents. Hapkido is very much it's circular motion, it's redirection,
It is quite possibly the most efficient throwing art ever in existence.
It is very much about
so efficient.
using the other person's momentum and weight against them.
Okay.
And
so
these kids, when they're going to the store, they're acting up, and so the parent goes and grabs their arm, pulls them over. These kids were using these techniques, breaking, and then running away from their parents.
That's awesome.
No joke. So we had to tell them, you cannot use this on your parents.
Wow.
To a 7-year-old. So yes, there are some.
Fair enough.
There's stuff that works. Okay.
But if we were to consult Master Ken or whatever his name is, a punch to the dick would work equally as well.
Yeah. Yes. It's like that episode of King of the Hill. It's like, where'd you learn that? Oh, I learned it at the women's self-defense course at the Y.
Let go of my purse. I don't know you.
I watched that. So I have that saved on my YouTube playlist, and I'll just watch it
King
sometimes.
of the Hill is so interesting. I once heard it described that it never took anyone by storm, but it will take you by light drizzle.
Yeah.
Like, you'll watch it at
Totally.
first, largely be out of boredom or there's nothing else on, and then all of a sudden you kind of crave sort of that low-key dry.
Yeah.
And then there'll be an episode or two where they will do something so hilarious you will cry from laughter.
Yeah.
My favorite one is when Bobby, was kissing the mannequin head, and his dad walks in, and he's like, oh my gosh. Still to this day, it kills me.
Yeah.
Mike Judd is a comedic genius.
Yeah,
and
totally.
the writers that worked on that.
Totally.
We really got off track.
Yes, we did.
Why don't we circle around again? I think we did cover some good things, though, right?
Oh yeah. Like
yeah.
what is it that makes these things degrade? I don't think Wing Chun, such as it is the same as it was when it was in use for beating people up, and we can kind of see what. I think we've covered pretty good as what caused that.
I agree.
But you had
Well-
to talk. Go. I want to hear this.
That's when you get the different styles, right? They're like, well, I study this town's version of Wing Chun, or I study this, and our focus is to retain the martial aspects of it while they retain the mysticism. And maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but
Again, it's keeping it in context. If you're doing it to keep that history, that identity, absolutely. If you're doing it to compete, if you're doing it to save your life or whatever, you need to adapt, you need to evolve.
thanks to my big mouth, I think we actually glossed over some of your accolades. Would you tell us a little bit about that now?
Yeah,
I want to see you turn bright red by admitting you're awesome.
Do it.
Oh gosh.
By the way,
it's turning red by the second.
we're at like 51 minutes, but I'm having a great time.
I'm having a great time,
Yeah,
too.
let's.
Okay.
I got all night. Let's just take all the time we want.
So being me, my mind is a total blank on. So guide me in which accolades or whatever that you're interested in.
Which ones?
Yeah, we have to narrow it down for him, because if he has to do it, he'll get embarrassed by how awesome he is. Okay, tell me about so what age did you start teaching Heidong Gumto?
So teaching it, I was probably 23. So
Okay.
I didn't start until I was 21. That's when I started.
Well, let's be honest. What was the average age of a teacher at that? You were an aberration compared to most people.
So
there.
most of the instructors were probably in late 30s, early 40s.
And at 23, you were better than most of them. Other than yeah.
That's impressive.
I mean,
And notice how he said it deadpan. Just yes, that is accurate.
so
Okay.
When I
you
moved to
then
St. George-
competed, went to another country where you are an outsider, and what did you proceed to do?
when?
Are you the guy where like you knocked the wind out of somebody and they got mad at you and threw you out of the
That's
tournament?
somebody else.
Okay, that's
I'm hoping
somebody
to have him on eventually.
Oh yeah, we gotta get that guy.
So
What did you proceed to do? I won. I'm so sorry.
I did was able to in a sparring match with guys that did were kind of more into that HEMA, a little bit more kind of self-taught. They kind of were a little bit of reenactors, a little bit not. They were above and beyond LARPers.
Yeah.
But they had some skill.
Yeah.
And the dude was not quite your size, Jonathan, but get pretty close. He had at least 50 pounds on me. This was
The
back
camera
early
doesn't do me
college.
any justice. I'm actually bigger than all these guys.
No, yeah, you're
Yeah,
big
we're
boy.
on a stool. I'm 5'10".
It's a freaking webcam. Get more people to listen so I can make money and get a better camera.
So, he's big, we're sword fighting, we're sparring, and we get in real close, and he comes in with this thrust, whatever, it was overhead. He comes in, and I just let go with my right hand, go total hapkido on him, wrap around his arm, bind it.
Nice.
So his sword is now dangling off back here, completely useless.
Yeah.
And his eyes were just like huge. I mean, just saucers, and it was just like this stunned, pissed off look.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm in danger.
I mean, at that point, then because he was so much bigger,
Yeah.
the advantage then went to him, and the fact that I was then left-handed. We're doing that. He eventually bound up that hand, and we ended up falling and rolling on the ground, and we just kind of stopped and called it from there because
Yeah.
it was just kind of this rolling around.
Yeah. Yeah. No one knows how to ground grapple in this scenario.
Okay, going back to Western fencing, I technically lost to the instructor, but that's only because we were. I was friends with one of the instructors at a fencing school in Utah Valley, and the only reason I lost is because we were doing foil. And for those that aren't familiar with the foil, you basically have from your neck, chest, down to about your groin here. That is your target area. That's the only place you can score points.
And it's so dumb because people will like put their arms in front and do weird thrusts and stuff.
They will do all
and
kinds of
block
stuff.
with their head, and I
Meta gaming, yeah.
So he had a hole in his guard, and I totally exploited it. So I would score points kind of right here, but most of them would land here.
Oh.
On his
so
sword
you're hitting
arm.
him, but...
So if it was saber or epee, I would have, hands down won in a real fight. His sword arm is going to be very, very useless very, very quickly. So he technically won and was absolutely thrilled about it. I mean, even still, it was a very, very close match.
Yeah.
The other instructor that was, being the judge and monitoring points and all that, after the instructor I was did
Justin,
the bat
I
with.
love you, but is there a short version?
Is there a rest stop between you
So
and the point?
basically, he turns to her. Sorry, this is another reason why I tend to be on that. I get long-winded.
Yeah, fair
but
enough.
basically, he turns to her and goes, "Do you want a turn now?" And she just went, "No." She absolutely refused because, again, because of my other backgrounds, I'm very aggressive.
You wouldn't know it. Like as a fighter, he's crazy aggressive.
That's awesome.
Which is I want to get him in armor and get him fighting.
Yeah, dude.
So I mean, I'm very much self-defense instructor. All of that. It's if you need to fight, do it fast, do it hard, neutralize the threat.
Yes. Default aggression. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Tell them about the time you were being judged on your kata, but because they were new judges, they were too stupid to realize how awesome you were. So when the master judges showed up, you took first.
Okay. So this was
That's not wrong.
Pan Am tournament.
Which
you
means?
have it was form competition. So we're doing it. These judges were a little bit newer to judging.
Yeah.
And that's fine. The sport is growing here in the U.S. or the art is growing here in the U.S.
Yeah.
I took third.
Okay. Good for you.
Then after that, we did belt testing. And for that, you had all of the masters.
Okay.
I mean, the ones from Korea, right?
This one, no. I mean, well, you had 2 or 3 of the masters that had come out. So not a whole bunch. There were, I think, 3 or 4, but then like 15, Western masters there. And all of the judges that were on that panel.
Okay.
So then we're doing the belt testing, which also involved those same forms. In belt testing, they have a special award called the Samarang, which is like a first place medal. I mean,
Okay.
It's very, very coveted, and they only give it to the highest tester.
Okay. So the guy that won, he's probably thinking he's a front runner for it, right?
Yeah.
And now so you go through
Big
and
surprise who gets it.
Yeah. So you go through. You
So
do
I
the
got
whole
it. So
thing.
I mean, it was very, very gratifying. Where it's like, okay, I lost this, and I'm like, hey, no, I didn't lose this.
Yeah.
It's just
And then
it's
all
just
the
the
masters
judging.
show up with the newbies, and they're like, "No, this guy's the guy."
So
Yeah,
was there like a conversation? Did like the master judges be like, he didn't what? You're fired.
No, it was disconnected enough, and I
Okay.
think at least one of the judges that was the masters that was on that panel, I think I did kind of see her kind of go, oh, it's like I for her, and I know her. It was very much a learning experience for her. It's like, okay, I need to learn a little bit more how I judge, and I've seen her before. Absolutely love her. She was at the world tournament when I was in the semifinals. She's just like coming around to all of us. Is like, awesome, win, go kick Korea's ass. So absolutely love her. So I mean, so I've taken
there, yeah.
Samarang in testing a number of times.
Cool.
I almost don't want to make this joke, but see, this is how you win with grace. I can rib him, I can say stuff, and he's like, "Oh, okay." I dare to even question your swordsmanship, and you drop I've won multiple tournaments nationally and went to worlds. It's like, Jake.
Here's the thing,
The big dog doesn't bark, Jake. That's what I'm saying.
Here's
the dog
thing.
that's little barks a lot because it knows it's little.
Really? The only time
He's about to do it. He's about to drop it.
The only time I ever raise that point is when you're trying to like flex on me or something, and I'm like, who wins and who doesn't? Let's just remember that question.
Jake, tell me, who's been winning our last duels together?
I don't know.
Really? Because we got some videos. We're going to watch me kick your ass here in a second.
All right, well, regional tryouts are next weekend, and we'll find out.
Okay,
I'll
something.
use a straight blade, and we'll find out.
If I may, a shift of topic that I think you guys will appreciate.
Yeah, let's hear this.
Jumping to armor.
Okay.
I don't know how familiar you are with Korean armor.
Not at all.
I brought some pictures, but
Yes, I want to see this.
Korean heavy cavalry armor was feared.
Is it this one?
Yes.
Okay, tons of lamella. Got it.
So you got that little picture here, and then that recreation.
Yeah.
Koreans, there's not a lot that survived through history. A lot of Koreans, because it was warfare, and when they didn't have warfare, they would melt the armor, they'd melt the swords down, turn it into plows.
Turn it into whatever they needed. Recycle the material.
Invasions with China and Japan, they tried to kind of wipe out Korean culture. But so what does survive is very limited. But it was unmatched
naval armor
and unrivaled between the Mongols, the Chinese, and Japanese.
So if you're out there and you do ACL or ACW or whatever armored combat is called where you're from, if you're thinking of an Eastern kit and you don't want to do Golden Horde, you might want to look up Korean cavalry armor.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it. It actually looks pretty
this
good.
Over here is kind of more like the infantry version. So it is that lamellar armor, but I mean it is like extensive.
Yeah, it's very comprehensive. So looking at these pictures, I'll see if I can't get these uploaded onto the work these in. If not, tough. But it looks much more comprehensive than a lot of its Eastern counterparts. There's not a lot of stuff that I see in the East that is this comprehensive in its coverage. Japanese armor is a freaking disaster. Yeah. There's actually leg armor. That's cool.
There is leg armor. It completely covers
and the shin armor too.
There's shin. It goes elbows. The hands.
It's like pants made of lamellar.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And so it's flexible enough.
They even have the equivalent of tassets. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So it's flexible enough that they could do like the Taekwondo high kicks.
Yeah.
I mean, flexible, but there is very, very little gaps.
Tell the microphone, not us.
Sorry. Very, very little gaps, but very, very flexible. So you can do the kicks. You can do these big, huge, sweeping, powerful moves.
So they figured, oh, wait, there's more.
Yep.
So actually, before we move on to the next one, this guy in the center, I think you're going to get a kick out of. Yeah,
this one?
Tell us about that one.
Again, that's that early heavy cavalry.
Where's the
naval?
the naval armor? Dude, this is probably my favorite looking. Dude,
that's cool.
And they would coat it in mercury to prevent it from rusting.
That's really smart.
So yeah, that naval.
Guess how much that weighed though? This will surprise you.
Some of the naval,
pounds?
120.
Some naval armor could weigh up to that, and so the naval armor was very, very much modeled after that cavalry armor.
Yeah.
So again, very flexible, but very durable. It can take a beating.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking. I might need to. Probably have to Google some of this so I can get a closer look at it. Like, because this one in the bottom corner, it's like his body harness. It looks like the plates are riveted to like a linen or a leather coat.
Yeah. So for that, it is stitched or riveted onto a heavy cloth underneath.
Okay, got it. Rather than being laced together like lamellar. So they have a variety.
It was typically, I mean, certain areas it was laced, but typically it was riveted to cloth.
Okay.
And then later,
So much more like a Western coat of plates.
Yeah.
But inside out.
Yeah.
Later during the Joseon, it kind of flipped, where then the cloth was on the outside and the plates were on the inside.
Yeah.
Which is a very Western.
Yeah, and so that one was designed more for arrows because they were much more mobile, a lot more cavalry, dealing with the Mongolians.
I can tell you actually why they probably had that cloth. The French came up with a similar thing. It was called is the French jupon. It looks like a gambazin, but they wore it over their plate, and basically it would collect. That cloth would collect arrows and pieces of arrows because when the arrows hit the armor, they basically explode. So you have shrapnel damage.
And it'd fly up into your helmet.
Yeah, it'd do all sorts of things. So rather, and then of course those curved cuirasses would hit and then do one of these, So the jupon just collected shrapnel. I'll bet you that cloth.
It's that similar thing. So that cloth is catching.
Excuse me, just a second. Sorry.
And then,
go ahead.
Because it was that riveted lamellar, plates, it would flex. So it absorbs that impact, and then that cloth is very, very similar in the fact that it didn't allow it to then go off and we have swords up against the wall, and Jonathan in his haste to go over here kicked them over it.
I caught them, guys.
We're just
except for the axe.
Oh man.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
it
Interesting that a similar they came up with basically the same solution to that problem.
and
Yeah.
that was also about the time that guns started coming into it. So again, you're looking at more projectile type stuff rather than close quarters combat.
Sure. Okay, so then these cloth covered armors, like what year are we talking about? What time period?
So that's during the Joseon is when it started. So you're looking, starting in the 1500s, if
Okay.
memory serves right. And then they did it until guns made it obsolete.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and there was you see similar armor. Well, you see armor evolutions in Europe surrounding the advent of gunpowder, but I mean it was different. It was more like certain armor pieces started falling off. Shin protection, lower arm protection, things that were further from your center mass. As the guns got better, more and more armor started.
Same thing,
going
and
away.
so they started implementing, chainmail with plates stitched into it.
Yeah.
And
So that was a gunpowder problem solver. Okay. Yeah, because that would not do well with a mass weapon. Something heavy.
And again, chainmail is not something commonly associated with Asian cultures and Asian armor.
Right.
The Koreans were ones that embraced that.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So I'll bet like the chainmail and the plates, it basically acted like a net that would decelerate the bullet more gradually.
So yeah, it was typically built in one of two ways. Either, you had a plate and then the chain linked to it, so you had these plates and then the chain attached, or it was a full chain and then it was stitched or riveted on over the top of it. But you would never see just chain.
Okay.
It always had plates of some kind, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and that sounds like that'd be like it's like a net to help mitigate. Yeah, interesting solution.
So when we're all done here, will you critique my training of Jake to see if I've been teaching him wrong?
Sure, we can look at it. I will throw a caveat, like I said, with the kids and everything, I'm a little out of practice and all that for the last few years.
Practice.
Yeah, still better at it than us.
Master 3 levels higher.
I think he's just trying to see how red I'll get.
Actually, yeah, let's switch gears. Let's review.
Let's go ahead and do fight review.
We should first do one of you fighting me to see what looks like when you don't know what you're doing, and then one to see if my training's actually been if it's worth anything.
Sure,
if I may.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good idea. We can go over because we've got a lot of stuff here. I've got stuff uploaded where I'm in Japanese kit, but I'm using a straight blade, and yeah, it's amazing how far like switching to a curved sword. I'm going to be doing a number of videos on the differences between using them, but man, I just switching to a katana.
If we have time, I can go into like more of the minute details on what makes a jinkum versus a katana. But
I think you should.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
Jinkum. What?
Yeah, jinkum.
Jinkum.
Okay. Let's see. Where is yours? That's me fighting Grant. That's me fighting you, but with a straight blade.
Did you not want to post your shame?
No, I uploaded it.
He's got some earlier ones. They're in the...
No, let's see. I just can't find it. Okay, here we go. So here's one where I'm really struggling. Come on.
Actually, towards the end of the fight, I just kind of slow down because he begins to do it right. I'm like, I want to encourage him to do that again. And you scored a couple points towards the end.
Yeah.
But I'm just hanging out in Kron, which allows me to essentially collect 90% of his strikes.
See, I'm still trying to fight like I've got a straight blade. I'm trying
so
to
I'll
like
do a feint here and nail him in the hip.
So I watched this and I had to text...
There it is.
Yep, that was a sweet shot. Yeah.
Jonathan and ask, what's your
I
background?
overbind him and hit him.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
Again.
this does not look like an Asian guy trying to get into a Western thing. This is very much a Western guy trying to do Asian.
Yeah, and that's absolutely it. All of my muscle memory, fundamentals that govern everything I do. Okay, here it is.
So you go to feint, I hit you in the leg.
Yeah, like fundamentals that govern everything. They just don't work with a curved sword. Like
it is different.
Oh,
it is
so different.
You didn't even... I love that shot. It's that one where I just hit your head and you're like, a regular straight sword would have blocked that.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was Jake before any formal Heidungam-do training. Now, let's see if I'm full of crap or if I can actually teach a monkey how to swing a sword.
Let's see. Which one is that? really get
I think
going.
you were on the one next to that.
Let's see. So this is the one. I can't tell. Okay, so that's the one with the more straight sword. Let me get you the one with the really curved sword, because that's where I really get some good combos on Phil.
Okay, yeah, you're keeping it low.
Yeah.
You're keeping it at his throat. Nicely done. Okay, you go up into high guard. Good.
My weight's
Bait
on
him.
the wrong foot.
Yeah, it's okay, but you're baiting him in. You're gonna. Nice,
Yep, there's some improvement.
Jake. Man, you're making me look good. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome.
You bring it back down rather than keeping it up for whatever reason. Good job. Yes, bait him. Nicely done, Jake.
That was I did some Western stuff for a second there, and I'm like, crap, that didn't work.
He loves to throw in those kicks, man.
And
So
that
I
is
slipped
one of
back
the
into some-
myths
You
with
slipped
armor.
back up. Yeah, you went
Yeah.
back up into the high. He got inside your head with that kick, I think. You just defaulted back to regular.
Yeah, so I'm slipping back into my Western habits right here.
Yep.
And it's not working for
Yeah,
you.
I'm struggling. So that's one of those things that, like, a fighting sport where you're, it's emphasis on the martial and the art that teaches you, you learn something you always fall back to your deepest level of training rather than rise to the occasion.
It's so true.
There's no such thing as like anime rage to the wind. Doesn't work. Doesn't happen.
I went up to True Edge Academy North, which is like the A campus. All the best fighters are up there.
Okay.
I hadn't done HEMA in like 6 months, and I'd literally forgotten everything, so I almost reverted completely to Olympic fencing
Fascinating.
with a long sword. Ironically enough, it either worked horribly right or horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But nothing in between.
Yeah.
And I was like,
my experience with this, man. All right. So I'm using the straighter one.
You fighting O2?
Yeah, fighting O2.
O2's strong. He
Yeah.
hits really hard, and I've been training him on his guard, so hopefully he blocks you a few times.
I bury him. Toward the last like 20 seconds.
So that
Nice.
low guard that you've got him using there is
Yeah.
more Japanese than it is Korean.
Okay.
True.
The sword kind of the sword sort of likes to do it.
Yeah.
I felt like could just be the length or something, or I just did a bad job making it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good note. Good, interesting. So you're seeing something that looks more Japanese than Korean. Noted.
Mm-hmm.
I have found, though, in armor and with a curved sword. Oop, nope, he hit you in the head.
Yeah.
He just clonked you.
Yep.
Should have done that high sweep. There it is. Now you're starting to do it. Turn
Yeah.
that blade up.
So I'm moving a lot faster than I was in the
Good.
previous
There
video.
you go.
And I made one mistake here. You'll know it is instantly. I didn't step.
Yep.
But that worked really well. Then let me go back and see.
So
that.
one of the things I was teaching him is in Heidan Gumdo, you step and swing. You don't swing with stationary legs or nothing goes right.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a scissor action.
Yeah.
So that's where you generate your power. Is you're cutting down and your step, and it's a step slide typically.
Which, for cross-pollination purposes, is very similar to Polish saber.
Yeah. Well, that would make sense because it's a curved sword.
Yeah.
Curved sword. Okay. Yeah, and so like it worked halfway because I did half the motion, whereas he went in with the sword and I just caught it, and it's like, get out of here. It was literally trying to stop a freight train with a BB gun. You know.
You threaded the needle.
Yeah.
You got the overbind. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
That was a good combo. Mm-hmm. Okay, now you're bringing it back up again, man.
Yeah. I do that when I start getting kind of like tired or whatever.
When you use form, you do well. Nice. You can tell he was rattled by that. You
Yeah.
can tell it. He's like, get
No,
out of
I
here.
put a couple of dents in it with a sword. I mean, that thing's got some thump to it, and then fight's almost over.
Yes, hit up. Nicely
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Jake,
So
I'm impressed. Nicely
a lot
done.
of progress in a couple of
Yeah.
weeks. So
What would you say? Am I an okay teacher? Do I pass?
I would give you a passing mark. Yes.
Thank you. It's probably like 1 point within pass fail, but I passed.
No, you cleared it by a better margin than 1 point.
So let me get a couple of thoughts from you. So the Heidan Gumdo, you did cuts and then like form movement, right? That is to be judged based on how well you do it.
So yeah, there's a couple.
Okay.
So you have that. The form is kind of the prestigious one.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like kata forms, and they judge you on the quality of the
Yes.
kata, the execution. Okay.
Heidan Gumdo is all about perfection. They are incredibly critical.
Sure.
So you have that. You have the cutting where you're doing typically bamboo is that. You also do paper cutting,
Okay.
and you do that with a wood sword. You do that with a wood sword.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Bokom. I still remember that one.
Yes, very good.
So now what is your thought like seeing it in action in this context? Give me some thoughts, like reflect on that a little bit.
So part of it is, seeing it in this heavier armor, it's kind of like, okay, what I'm trying to think, okay, what techniques are going to work? Which ones aren't? Which ones are going to have that variant? Like you're talking about, that low guard just feels more natural.
Yeah.
And that might be true, and true to Koreans. In a combat situation, if it works, they use it.
Right.
I would say probably the biggest thing as far as using Hatem Kumdo in this situation that I'm seeing you not using is getting offline and getting to his flanks.
Okay.
So Hatem Kumdo, especially when you go up and you do that high block where you want it to slide off, step in with that, step to the 45 to then come around.
Okay. We went over that, though.
Yes, we did. Yeah. We did. It's
so this is, again, Western, where you're talking about duels, you're talking about Olympic fencing. Again, this is why I struggle with Olympic fencing, is you are stuck in a line. You cannot move or deviate very much.
HEMA, though, is triangle steps, circular steps.
Yes.
HEMA does get offline. In fact,
I really appreciate that.
And I've seen HEMA people that came from like Kendo that remark that Kendo is very linear, and they like that HEMA is more circular. And
Kendo is stick tag.
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Just call it what it is.
Yeah.
Again, it is very linear. Which I've sparred with Kendo people, but that's like why I've never studied it. It's just my motion, even when I was like self-training as a teenager and whatnot, that's just kind of my natural style is more circular and more moving around. I'm not a linear. And when I fight linear people, they usually get kind of frustrated. It kind of throws off their game because they're used to like, hey, come at me head to head. I'm like, no, I'm going to move around. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that.
Now, remarking a bit on that, where it's circular, there are a couple of things. There are a couple of things that I discovered last week when me and John were working some fundamentals. Is that the way that my guard system works with a straight blade is it's a square, right? So if I'm,
hand us a sword.
Yeah. Go ahead and hand me the long sword if you would.
Do it mine. It's prettier.
No, I need the shorter ones. More easier to manage in a tight confine.
Can you believe those swords weigh the same?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So the way that my guard works is I'm here. It's here, and then it's here. So top two corners, or then you go lower, and it's here, or it's here. Right. So it's a square. All right. When you get a circular sword, let's put this back down here. When you get a curved sword, it's all about a circle. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's see. I'm actually kind of curious to see if you do it.
Yeah. So you're here, right? And then you're here. Okay. And then you got the low one where it's all about a circle. I'll give this back to you.
It's hard to display in this room.
Yeah, it's hard to display.
But everything is circular movement, stepping offline, stepping offline.
And the sword is a curve. If you let it go long enough, it'll come around to a circle. It's a very loose radius. That's what I'm looking for here, relatively speaking, of course. Why did I get on this subject? Oh, yes. So it's all about what you do when your sword contacts your opponent's sword that's so different from a straight blade, let's say a Western longsword, is that it's all about moving their blade away from you. It's all about just letting it go past, pushing it away, something like that, versus a longsword. You
want to gather it closer.
You gather it close to center mass so you can manipulate it the way that you want it to. And this, it's much more allowing the danger to go past you, right? It's like water around a rock.
Yep.
And then it's just a totally different philosophy. Let me pull up a video here. This is actually
Western swords do that.
Yeah.
I thought the other video of us fighting was better than this one, but
yeah, well, I think that there's a couple of them, but
so this is me and Jake. We both have long swords. This is his second fight with me with my new super sword that I built with.
This is after you'd done kind of that new stance work with Chad.
This is the one where you bend it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
Well, the temper on it's bad, so eventually it gets bent so many times. Eventually, it doesn't bend anymore. But this was when it first came out. I should also say the sword was a collaborative effort. I wouldn't have been able to do it without a good friend of mine helping me. He owns the milling shop, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll see a little bit of deflection, and redirection that but straight blades really don't do it as well as katanas. The katanas do that better than anything else, really.
There's the closest I come to this. So this is back when I was still a little fatter than I am now, and I was just starting to hit the cardio. And so he's so fast, I actually threw out a maneuver called the striken, which is a back false edge cut, because I can't do a proper block. And so it's you'll see it.
Yeah. You also see how much faster I am with a straight blade, and this is when I'm still like out of shape and not conditioned.
And see, right now I'm trying to stopping him with those hits that are coming in. I'm blocking 90% of them with just these quillions. But if I give him any, I wish we had the other one. Yeah,
Yeah, I think I have the other one.
Well, the thing is, Jake's so fast that he can score. He scores these points on my elbows and my hips. And so the idea with this technique is I want to keep him up. And the moment he gives me his head, I'm going to score a point on him. So I get to dictate where his sword is, which allows me to make him less of a. There are less factors to consider than defend myself.
Oh, dang, that's
Yeah, so
I don't think you have it. That's okay. Just for kicks and giggles, show the one when I'm fighting Buddy.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Oh, this one's actually pretty good. So this is Chad, my HEMA instructor, and the finest swordsman I've ever met. And watch him. I mean, he even said it himself. He's wearing a challenge jacket that weighs a fraction of what Jake's armor weighs. But watch him just work them.
Yeah, I just
using
couldn't
proper
keep
HEMA
up.
technique.
Yeah,
and you can see they're going into squares, not circles.
Yeah, I couldn't keep up because he's wearing nothing, and I'm like in a full kit. And I'm pedal to the metal, and my shoulders are burning. I'm like, gah, this sucks.
It is interesting to see because not only you have a straight blade, but you have a two-edged sword. So you see Chad throwing a lot of false edges at him.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, for those who are unfamiliar with it, a true edge, if you think of a katana, has one edge, that's the true edge. It's the sides facing down towards the ground. It has a lot of power behind it. This allows you to do what's called binding hard and even over binding. So our blades meet, I slide past, I hit you anyways despite your best efforts. You hit with a false edge, it doesn't have as much power, but it has more rotation and movement. So you can actually rotate your blade around someone's guard and hit them anyways. It's called binding soft. And having both of those weapons at your disposal is one of the reasons why I will say to this day, having fought with both, blades of a single edge style, whether they be a katana or a Jinkum, are not as effective dueling weapons as a longsword.
I would agree with that. The Jinkum or any of that
Keep talking. I'm going to try to upload that other video.
are very, very effective in group fights.
Oh, you should tell us about this. This is actually...
Yeah. Oh, get on this. I'm listening while I upload this.
You were talking about the historical recordings of the Japanese coming in with their odachi.
Oh, yes, compared to the Sangsudo.
Yes. Tell us all about that.
Okay,
That's cool.
So, the Japanese nodachi, it is recorded. I even have the book here.
I'll show them.
For those HEMA people, you'll recognize that this is essentially like the Korean version of it. It's their military training guide, and it's full of all kinds of stuff like assume the pose of encountering a thief or the 5 petals or sit and glimmer, so it built for their time, not for ours, and it's fun.
Vernacular that fits that time.
But they talk about how when the Japanese came and they were using their nodachis, is they would get a line of them and they would come running in, swing them up over their head, and come crashing down. So this linear motion. Big swords coming down. Very, very shock and awe kind of thing.
All as one unit, cutting at once.
Okay,
Yes.
so big, long battle lines. Wooka, wooka.
Like a
Yes.
wave crashing on the beach.
And, I mean, it's effective. There's no doubt about it. It's effective, but, it's not super sustainable. But, when used in the right situation, devastating. Now, the Koreans...
I like this one.
When they would use their version, the Sangsudo or the Jangdo, it is not linear.
Okay.
It is big sweeping arcs.
Yeah.
And the way the form is taught, and this is a little bit of my extrapolation of it, but I've heard many others that have agreed with it. Basically, they would wait for the line to kind of soften just a little bit.
Okay.
and then these massive longsword guys would come out, and then it's huge sweeping arcs, clearing as much ground as they can. They sweep out for a number of steps, then they sweeping around, keeping themselves clear as they run back. It's fun. This is that sit and glimmer. They will sit down, and then they start trying to shine it in the eyes, where you have the pikemen, the arrows, whatever come in, and then when that softens up, they come up, and then they're just kind of hacking into the lines, big sweeping, trying to create as much.
So if I can clarify this, essentially where the Japanese were coming in for shock and awe is it crashing as a big wave in unison.
Yeah.
For more effective combat with less numbers, they paired their extra great sword wielding counterparts with bowmen.
Okay.
The bowmen would follow a volley, and then as they were reloading,
And that would soften the line, right?
the great swordsman would come in with sweeping motions, which knocks linear motions out of the way.
Right.
And then they do this cool, like, barbarian Diablo 2 spinning motion back.
I mean, it is spinning and jumping, coming back. They are trying to get it back as fast as they can.
And then the maneuver is called sit and sparkle, where they drop on the ground and then they try to blind the eyes of the Japanese with their sword.
Sunlight. Okay.
While more arrows go, and then they do it again.
That is cool.
Or they would just kind of hang it out there and kind of basically
And
try and
protect.
use it as like a kind of a shield, because it's it's big.
Big old sword, yeah.
I would say actually the Korean greatsword's bigger than the Japanese. I saw some of them. They're cute. They've got to be, some of them, like 7 feet long.
Typically not quite that long.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they're comparable in length to the Japanese nodachi and odachi, but Korean swords in general are wider.
Okay.
And usually a little heavier. Like typically you would not see a fuller on it.
Okay.
So like, the one I gave you here, my demonstration blade.
Yeah.
And if I have a heavier blade, I can simply knock your blade out of the way.
Exactly. And so those big swords, as they're swinging around, huge motion, a lot of power. If you try and block it, it's going to move you. If you don't block it,
It's going to cut you.
yeah. you're not surviving it. So I mean, a lot of it, again, very circular motion. You're generating a lot of power. So it did tend to be heavier and thicker, not by a ton.
Yeah.
But it is a thicker blade.
You can do a lot with half a pound, half to pound and change. You can get a lot out of it. You can get a lot of mileage out of that if you know what you're doing.
They also are not typically as curved as the Japanese blades.
Okay.
And there is actually a lot of straight tip work and thrust.
Fascinating. But like a straighter blade would do that really well.
Yeah, so you'll come in and like Western fencing, you'll spin around them, you'll hit, flick it up, and then go in.
Okay.
So
You can do that with a Korean blade.
Yeah, you can do that because it's not as curved. The Korean blades, they do tend to be, differentially tempered like the Japanese. Mm-hmm. And so you get that arc.
Wasn't there also a famous swordsmith who had 3 different, not just a soft spine and a hard shell. He had a hard shell, medium shell, and then a soft spine.
Wow. Oh, if you look at Japanese, Korean, you research it, there's some that have that. There's some that have 5 or 6 or 5 or 7 different types of steel, and there's all kinds of different geometries.
Like Japanese get all the credit for building amazing swords with limited tech, which they did and were, but the Koreans, man, they.
So when you say different kinds of steel, are we talking about different hardnesses, different molecular formations, or are we talking about swords that are made from different carbon contents?
Typically carbon content. I mean, their technology back,
Okay,
1,000 years ago, whatever.
I just wanted to clarify the terminology a little bit.
Yeah, so you'll have, like that outer shell, or even just like, it'll be like if you were to like cross section it, it'll only be like a triangular diamond piece at the tip for where the edge is, and then everything else is different.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that outer casing would be very, very hard.
It's basically what, pearlite or?
Martensite is the hard one.
Martensite.
Pearlite's soft.
I always get those two confused.
Pearlite is like partial spring. So it comes from, you can get it by, like 1095 will sort of naturally do it if you oil quench it at thick enough, because it's a shallow, you'll end up with a pearlite. Or you can get it by like, so critical temperature, that's the temperature where you're going to, if you quench it at critical, that's where you'll get maximum hardness. So if you go subcritical temperature, it's sort of like, how do I say this?
I'm familiar with it, but I mean, for our listeners.
It's not as good as fully hardening and then tempering back for a spring temper, but you will get a spring temper.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, you'd have that, and then you'd have like a medium carbon, and then you might have an even softer.
Okay.
But those typically are pretty rare.
Yeah.
Typically, they were a monosteel that were differential.
But monosteel is superior to differential hardening.
Well, not a monotemper, but like a one steel.
Monosteel, but differential
Oh,
tempered.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where you get that sharp edge, softer.
I have a question for you. Essentially, the curve is put in the temper.
Yes.
So how were the Koreans doing differently to get less of a curve?
They forged it straight and then just tempered it, where the Japanese typically, depending on what they want, would pre-curve. They would forge a curve into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, then they, calculate with, okay, if I form it at this curve radius, then I temper it, it's going to curve back,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
even further.
Yeah.
Where Koreans typically, from what I've seen historically, again, Koreans, due to everything, it's a little more difficult to research than others.
Yeah.
But typically it's straight, and then that curve just comes from the temper.
Yeah, I can even validate that. Just when I went on my katana making binge a million years ago, I would give like just a bit of a curve, it's just a little bit, and that encourages it where to really curve hard.
Okay.
And then like if there's less differential in the thicknesses of the spine relative to the edge, because you don't grind it down to a sharp edge, you grind it, you leave like it would be like a rebated edge. That's how much steel you leave, just to give it some extra meat to handle the quench so it doesn't crack. So just the differential between the spine and the edge is, if that ratio is a little more flat, that'll minimize curve too. I used to be really good at this, and I can't do it at all.
I gave up using dinosaur steels. I mean, I do this is going to
dinosaur
be
steel.
This is 4140 VAR, and it's going to be a sword breaker.
And he feels a little dirty by touching it.
I do.
Okay.
But I just make stuff out of Marcel Tensic age-hardened super alloy, because in every conceivable way it is superior.
Another common thing you would see with the Korean blades is actually Damascus folding.
Oh yeah.
So you'd have they'd have again those couple different types of steel, and then they would.
I get to be pedantic, because Damascus folding is not Damascus steel. That is pattern weld that people mislabel, and they do this on Forged in Fire, and I want to reach through the screen and slap them, because supposedly they're experts. Stop calling pattern welded steel Damascus, you idiots! It's pattern weld. Damascus steel is a high carbon steel with carbon nanotubes that form belong vanadium impurities. I want to swear. It makes me. Let's go make some ball bearing Damascus. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to settle it down.
Okay.
I'm going to keep it PG-13. Just idiots with speakers, much like ourselves, but they're wrong. They're so wrong. It's pattern weld. It's not Damascus. Okay, I'm done.
We'll keep our terminology the same. Pattern welded, yes. That was another very common thing they do.
Folded and welded, yeah.
The thing that they would not typically do is they would not then acid etch, so you would not.
It wouldn't be as evident.
You don't see that. I mean, so you have that.
Now, was it decorative, or was there a reason for it? Because usually pattern welded stuff is not as strong, not as robust as non-welded.
Well, okay, so I mean, how did they produce steel? Was it much the same way? Was it bloom steel? Basically,
through a lot of history, it would have been very similar to like tomahawkany.
Okay, so I can actually answer that question then. So tomahawkany and bloom steel, they are the same freaking thing.
I literally got into an argument with a guy who has his doctorate in this kind of thing, and he was describing to me the furnace they use, the tomahawkany furnace, and then I'm like, so it's a bloom furnace? No, it's not. And then he started talking it to me, and then all of a sudden he said, and then they follow the bloom, and I looked at him, and I'm like, so it's a bloom furnace, and you just you literally just said it was a bloom furnace.
Yeah. Anyway, don't get me started. But basically, what comes out at the end is a piece of metal that looks like something that came out of a volcano. It looks like a lava rock. It doesn't look like steel. And you have this lump of shit. And one part of it will be really high carbon, one part of it will be medium carbon, some of it will just be straight iron, because it's an
some of it's just slag.
Yeah. So basically, the purpose of folding is to actually consolidate it all into one mass, but then it's also to homogenize it. It's sort of like the same way you would fold dough, like pizza dough, is to even out even out all the ingredients. That's why they did it out of necessity.
And again, that you're creating those carbon structures, just like you're building the gluten in your dough. It's that same.
It's actually very similar. It's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of
marbled rye is Damascus steel.
Don't you even dare.
Dare you?
I will throw in
Dare
another.
you? How dare you? How dare you?
All right,
Okay.
I'm done. I'm done.
Korean steel typically was better than, and I'm sure someone's going to yell at me for this, was better than Japanese steel.
No, it was.
Yeah.
The reason was just resources.
Yes, that's the reason.
So like Three Kingdoms area, way back then, even on the very tip of the peninsula, they had trade routes all the way back to the Middle East, to Persia.
Which is where the finest steel at the time in the
great
world.
iron. Yeah.
So they would import that. They learned some of that.
Now, Japan, for a brief moment in history, did import German steel, which was fantastic, but only for a brief moment in period. So to give you an idea how crappy the steel in Japan really was, or should I say the materials they had to work with, because I think it is the nature of the Japanese to do more with less, and that is never better reflected in their sword steel.
Or them saving casings during World War II.
Saving casings during World War II. And it speaks volumes about them as their culture, as their people. I have a great respect for it. There were two ways you essentially got steel in Japan if you wanted it to come from the island. Either A, you were lucky enough to own one of the two only mines, I think, at the time that existed. There might be more now, but we're talking way back in the day. The other way is, this sucks, if you can, they would take red clay.
Okay.
That's iron rich because it's rusting, and they would feed it to chickens, and then follow the chickens around. The sulfuric acid in the chicken's stomach would break that down, and the only thing that would be left would be the iron sands, and they'd collect the chicken poop and separate it and try to get iron from that.
Amazing.
I mean, it speaks volumes about just how
very smart,
very
clever
resourceful
people. Yeah.
with very little resources. So the iron they were getting has been processed by a chicken's digestive system. And so throw that into coal, and so the quality of material working with is worse than the cheap siding you see on like a shack. And they somehow turned that into a weapon of war, and I find that amazing.
Yeah.
But the steel is shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
Steel
the
junk.
craftsmanship that
The
they developed.
craftsmanship is...
Oh my gosh.
I mean, the Japanese woodworking, the Japanese tools.
Again, this is, going back to that.
Japanese craftsmanship. I am not ragging on.
Again, this, going back to their traditions, their ritualism.
Yes.
I mean, this isn't quite typically going to mysticism, although sometimes it does.
It does.
And, this is tied in with the Shinto religion and history. It turned them into some of the most spectacular craftsmen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I've seen up close, artifacts, artifact katanas, that are, centuries and centuries old. And it's like, I don't think I'll ever get that good.
And you look at the modern stuff, you go and try and from like these historical, where they trace the lineage of the Smiths and all that, to get just the blade, you're looking at like 10 grand. And it's like, that artisan, I would pay that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause you're getting more than just a weapon. You're getting a piece of art.
It just
a piece of history, a piece of religion, a piece of the soul of Japan.
It's really, they're really cool.
I have a reference for the katana. I don't want to just crap all over it.
Yeah,
that's why you brought me here.
Look, we're not crapping on katanas. We're crapping on weebs
who take it far too seriously.
We're crapping on spurgy weebs.
Well, me and Jake are particularly bitter about this because we oftentimes will be a part of Renaissance fairs. They have us fight because we're entertaining to watch. We go full speed on each other with sparks and all, with weapons. But why don't you tell them about that time you had somebody approach you in little more than some cobbled together,
it was LARP armor,
and literally look you dead in the eye and be like, well, you guys are slow. This armor is just as good as yours.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And the guy was a LARPer, and
a little detached from reality.
A lot. I'm sorry, I just
Because this person, I assume, drove here, so they were smart enough to have a license. Operate a vehicle weighing over 2,000 pounds.
Yes, and that's
Can
exactly
I say
it.
a lot of people that have licenses shouldn't.
Yeah, dude, Utah roads, dude. Anyway, but it was leather LARP armor, and I say it a lot. There's swords and there's sword-like objects.
Hand me my sword for a second.
Yeah.
Pick up your sword. So this is what Jake did because he just would not let this go. Like of how great of an armor smith he was, and he kept saying for you to strike him full force.
Yeah.
With your sword.
And I refused to do it. And so just like hold it up just vertical or something. And I just did like that. Well, maybe I had a little bit more. It was more like that. Just a little pop with a falchion, nothing. And the armor that he was wearing, it was like oil tanned cowhide is what it would have been. So it was really soft, really supple, really flexible. And so there's swords and there's sword-like objects, which is what this is what you find in Asian gift shops. Oh God! Sword-like objects, even functional sword-like objects. I'll talk about that later. And then you have armor, and then you have armor-like objects. He was wearing an armor-like object.
But it literally took you lightly tapping him with a sword for his eyes to go huge, and his whole world. You could just.
Yeah, you could watch like the violence of the paradigm shift in his countenance. It was amazing.
He was like, "Oh,
yeah,
oh."
It's just
and we get mobbed by people like this.
Yeah.
And here, I'm not disparaging LARPers.
I LARP. I actually LARP.
I've never done it. It looks like a heck of a lot of fun. I don't think I will ever have that much free time on my hands.
Dude, don't do it. Just don't. But, I'm in. I can't get out. But don't do it.
I mean, I've been actually kind of pushing that we should do a segment called "Shaving the Neckbeard," where we invite people to come on the show who are utterly convinced of their weeb powers.
Yeah.
And we just help them shift their paradigm just a little bit. Just and film it.
Yeah.
And if they're proven wrong, we get to shave their neckbeard.
Yes, at the very least, a segment I'll be introducing fairly soon is called "Measuring the Neckbeard," where you guys can just send in your experience with neckbeards that think they know something about sword fighting and like they're so disconnected from reality. And I've got one that I'll be sharing soon. This was glorious.
Again, this is that mysticism. This is that Hollywood. This is that ideal that we live to. But when you cannot separate that from real world, life and death scenario, that's when you run into problems.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, how do we get on this topic? How do we even do this? So we got something shifted us to that guy at the Renaissance Fair.
It was probably me. Oh no, you were being kind of bitter. I was being someone was being bitter about people being annoying. And I'm like, full disclosure to the people that are listening, me and Jake, when we go out and we perform and fight, we get mobbed by people, and that is why we were grumpy old bastards about it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's why we're grumpy old bastards about katanas.
Yeah. Because people coming up with some stainless steel thing they saved their nickels for at an Asian gift shop, and they're like, check out my sword. And I'm like, that looks really nice. You should be really proud of that. And then they're like, and it can do this and that. And I'm like,
have you ever opened the hilt?
Man? What?
Have you ever opened the hilt of some of those things from the Asian gift store?
I never have.
Crap. It's crap. Like the tang, it's a rat tail tang. And when I say a rat tail tang, like a rat tail tang.
And even then, typically the tang is like tack welded onto the blade. It's not even one piece.
Yeah, if it hits something,
tack welded.
If it hits something, well, I've broken a bunch of them.
Me too.
So you hit something solid, and then you're holding a handle, and that's it.
I learned that the hard way in high school. I was like, hey, we got these. These are cool. We ordered them.
Yeah, if you're in high school and you're
we
young
hit
and
it,
dumb,
and
we'll
it's
give you a
like
pass.
it broke, and after that, look at it, and it's like, oh, they're scary. They are decorations, and it is a perfectly acceptable thing to have it on a decoration. Just do not swing it at someone, especially if they have a sword or armor or
it has not been imbued with magic.
A leather jacket.
Oh man. Anyway, so just kind of bringing it back around, katanas really are cool because of what the people that made them were able to do with what they had. It's damn impressive. That being said, they still have their limitations. They can only cut halfway through a tank. Fine. All right, so I think it's been a pretty good podcast. I think we're just kind of,
we're just winding down.
Yeah,
bullshit,
we're just
bullcratting.
bullshitting.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have anything else you wanted to put to our guest?
After this, you want to show them some forms with the blade and have some fun?
Sure, we got.
Maybe.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we have enough time to talk about it.
No, I don't have enough time.
Okay.
We can definitely set up, another
Could we have
Saturday.
you as a
or whatever.
rerecurring guest?
What?
Yeah, we can totally have you on.
I am more
I'm
than
down.
willing to do that. I've had a blast.
Welcome to come back on. This was
Yes,
fun.
I've had a lot of fun.
Let's wrap this up. We were going to watch my other longsword fight with John.
Only a minute and 11 seconds.
Yes,
Sure.
This is the
yes.
very first time he's ever seen this blade.
Yes, and I'm going to pause just like a couple times to show you the collect it and control. Like you see me do that.
I
a couple
actually do
times.
a perfect collection of it on my blade,
Yeah.
and even you remark on it in the middle of the fight.
Yeah.
You should turn it up so it can be heard.
Yeah, let me run back into my software here.
So my dueling sword has shilts on it, and they're like these little bumps above my quillions.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem kind of goofy, but they actually afford you so much control.
Why is it not? I don't know.
That's okay. I know when it's coming. See, I'm pushing him around. He's not used to me being in his face. He's trying to throw those wide swings, and he's getting them in until he goes for my guard, and I'm stopping him.
Oh yeah.
But
You stop a lot of linear stuff. It's really frustrating. It's right. It's coming up here.
I'll show you when it comes up.
So you have to stop for a second to check your sword.
Now, at this point, no one's pushed you in our ring. Like, I'll be honest with you. What were you thinking
I
at
was
this
like,
point?
oh, he got aggressive. I hate it when big guys that can keep up with me are aggressive.
And I'm about to perform this. This is called, I did a crump. I catch it, and what I do is I whip it laterally and catch his blade off. But I bait my elbow, boom. And then I do it again, and I'll whip it around. I'll score a point on his head.
So I think it's like right here. Okay, so
There.
right there. So this is an example of catch and control. I'm leaned way the heck over, but
To
you can
avoid
actually
the
see.
head.
You can see right in my strong. You can see I've got it right in my strong after I catch it, and then you do another thing. I think you do it again.
But I score a point on you the second time.
Yeah, it's coming. I can't remember where it is.
Your armor wasn't quite figured out yet, so you couldn't raise it high enough to collect it without ducking.
Yeah.
Now you can. So I have a false edge. I throw the false in to knock it out of the way, and then I score a point on him with the true edge. Yep. There
Right
it is.
there.
There.
It was sweet.
Yeah, and that's straight
Like,
out of...
You got the one, and then the second one, I was up there enough. I mean, you've done a lot to work out scar tissue out of my shoulders, because I'm like basically in a straitjacket, made my own scar tissue. But
What'd you think of watching that?
It's one of those. It's like, my history is so much, more of the Asian, and it's like most of it has been unarmored. So it's, it's trying to see, okay, what is working, what is not, without, when you're watching a sparring match, things are a little bit more muddled. There's more improv going on there.
Yeah.
And so, it's harder to see the technique. So it's one of those, I would probably have far more comments to, you break it down, you watch some of the drills, you watch some of that, and then
To
bring
me,
it in.
that maneuver seems like a uniquely Western technique because it requires a false and true edge.
Yeah.
Is there anything like that you can think of in Heidon Gumdo? It works.
Sort of, but it's a much bigger motion.
Well, we'll do it after we're done filming.
yeah.
Yeah, we can kind of look at that.
All right. Well, you know what? I think this has been a great podcast, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Love you guys. And thanks, Justin, for coming on. You're welcome back on the show anytime. I think I got to get another mic and another pair of ears, and we get James Dowdle, who does, he knows his Japanese history, speaks Japanese and teaches it. And I think having you two talk to each other would be cool.
I'd say I'm learning Korean. I do speak the Korean as far as in a class you teach it.
Yeah.
There is all the commands are taught and you do it in Korean. So
Right.
I can run a class in Korean.
Well, just your knowledge of like military history, and like that would be an interesting exchange to see
Yeah.
that and influence the two
Two
cultures.
homunculoids and then two intellectuals off to the side.
Exactly. I'm just sitting here with my buttons,
Here I am with witty quips and anecdotes, but essentially nothing. A story told by an idiot. And then you two will be talking, bringing us actual information.
Yeah, that'll be cool. We'll have to do that. But yeah, thanks everybody for listening. We're gonna go ahead and kill this thing.
All right.